All right, so we're standing outside the Orangeburg County Courthouse today where Circuit Court Judge Roger Young has revoked the probation of Bowen Turner, the accused teen rapist whose controversially lenient sweetheart plea deal garnered national outrage just 3 months ago. Readers will recall on Mother's Day, Turner was arrested after his sweetheart deal, accused of violating multiple conditions of his release, and today the hammer fell on Bowen Turner. Judge Young revoked his probation, required him to register as a sex offender, and in another indignity, refused to give him credit for time served, 65 days at the Orangeburg Calhoun Regional Detention Center. You hear the thunder rumbling in the background down here, folks. It was rumbling in the courtroom too, let me tell you. Bowen Turner's case, again, drawing national attention. Folks felt justice was not done in this case, particularly Bowen Turner's victims, but today, Bowen Turner's own actions caught up with them, folks. His parole was revoked. He will be reporting to the custody of the South Carolina Department of Corrections for a 1-year sentence. Stay tuned for much more on this story and the victims movement that it sparked here on FITSNews.com.
All right, you're Bowen Turner.
Yes, sir.
You're here today, you're charged with violating your terms of probation. Did you get a copy of the warrant to report?
Yes, sir.
You admit that you willfully violated the terms of probation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, what do you want to tell me?
Your Honor, this is a very sensitive case here, Your Honor. We'd like to just mention the fact that shortly after Mr. Turner received his probationary sentence, Your Honor, he was back out and violating local laws, violating the local laws. And we believe that when an administrative hearing was held in this matter, Judge, and we do have a recommendation from our position from our state, and we'd like to recommend a revocation in this matter, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Yes, Your Honor, that please the court. To begin with, I was not involved in the underlying case that gave rise to Mr. Turner's current probationary sentence. However, I do know that there was 3 people or their families who claimed to be victims, and Mr. Turner only pled on one of those charges. That was the charges pertaining to Chloe Bess, and so therefore we believe that only Ms. Bess and her family should be allowed when it's time for the victims to speak, because those were the only victims whose charges he pled to. With that being said, Mr. Turner admits that he did violate terms of his probation, and he's prepared for you, Your Honor, to possibly activate his wide-awake sentence. We would ask that you consider the fact that he's been incarcerated since his arrest on May the 9th, that was 65 days ago, and consider revoking the time he has served. Furthermore, we're requesting that the issue as to whether he should have to be registered as a sex offender once his sentence is completed be held in abeyance. We've retained the services of Dr. Jeffrey McKee. Judge Houston signed the funding order for us to do that. And we're asking Dr. McKee to conduct a psychosexual evaluation of Mr. Turner before we have that determination whether he would have to register as a sex offender. Dr. McKee's told me and my office that he hopes he can begin this evaluation in the next week or so. We had to get some documents that he requested, some medical documents and other things. So we requested all the necessary documents and should have them to him shortly. We'd ask you to take into consideration Mr. Turner's young age, his lack of a prior record before pleading to these charges. He had no record before this plea. Additionally, Mr. Turner admits that he also has an alcohol problem, which is the primary issue underlying the newest charges that gave rise to this violation. Mr. Turner wants to address these issues through a rehabilitation program. Our office, we have a lady named Sheila Lake who does mitigation work for us, and she sets up people getting into rehabilitation centers. She's working with him to get him screened and get him into a rehabilitation center for his alcohol issues. I've informed him that he may have to wait until after he completes an active wide-awake sentence if that's what Your Honor seeks him to do. But I want to reiterate that Mr. Turner has recognized these issues, knows they need to be addressed, and plans to do so at his earliest opportunity. So we ask for you to do what's fair in this situation.
As I read this, special conditions was that at the end of probation there have been no violations of the sex offender conditions, and defendant is not required to register as a sex offender. Standard sex offender conditions, number 11 says, I will not consume alcohol beverages We'll submit the testing as instructed by my agent. The basis for his revocation is he went to this bar and was drinking and he was underage and got drunk and publicly drunk. That was the basis for publicly disorderly conduct. Wouldn't that violate, I will not consume alcoholic beverages condition?
It may, Your Honor, but I'm asking to have the opportunity to mitigate that issue. If I could get this evaluation done, it's probably something that should have been done long ago, but I think it's necessary to be able to mitigate and argue as to why that provision should be activated, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if I may, Your Honor, the sex offender conditions are clear, Your Honor. It clearly states that he's not to consume alcohol, Your Honor. In addition to that, once he was arrested, he went to the jail and he also threatened public officials there. He was charged with that as well. On our citation, C 38220095, we'll also like to have that charge disposed of here today as well, Chair.
What charge is that?
He was threatening a public official, Your Honor. We charged him with that, and
What do you mean you want me to dispose of that?
well, we charged him at the same time we issued this warrant for public disorderly conduct. We subsequently issued a warrant, issued a citation, charging him with threatening a public official at the jail. Now we have both of these. This is a pending citation, just as this warrant is. The warrant that we have before the court as well.
Secretary said, I didn't get anything about that in my package.
You didn't get the citation?
I got 2 pages here. Basically, they said they wanted to have him revoked because he got arrested for public disorderly conduct. It didn't say anything about wanting to go forward on another charge. He's admitted he's willfully violated.
Yes, Your Honor.
That's enough to send him off on his active why.
Yes, sir.
So then the only question is, does he need to register as a sex offender?
Yes, he would according to the special conditions, Your Honor. And what we would do is we would ask the court to withdraw this sort of citation if he's revoked.
Say that again?
We have an active served citation on him, charging him with threatening a public official, Your Honor. So if the court revokes him, we'll ask the court to withdraw this citation so that he can go and serve that time on that one. Right?
Your Honor, all I'm asking is just for a full and fair opportunity to put together mitigation so that and he's going to be on probation for almost 5 more years, so there's plenty of time to address the issue of whether he has to register once his probation is complete.
All right. So, you want to say something?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
The
For the record, your name?
my office was handled this case. The plea took place and brought us here today. The original jurisdiction of Solicitor Pasco, and he asked our office to handle this case because of some conflicts he had. Dennis was the one who sentenced Mr. Turner, and he was unequivocal in his sentencing of him and his remarks to him at sentencing that any violation of the probation, the sex offender protocols that would be used during probation would require 2 things. 1, for his probation to be revoked in full. 2, for him to have to register as a sex offender. Now, I'm here on behalf of the victims and the Attorney General who gave me authority to come down here today. To ask you, that is exactly what should be done. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you and say something. I know typically speaking, you don't hear solicitors at probation violations, but it's important. It's a highly contested case. He's mentioned 3 separate victims, but the one that was before you today is the one we're here representing in court today on these charges. But the judge was just clear as a bell during sentencing what was going to happen. Any mitigation and all that will have to be down the road somewhere. But right now, I would ask that you revoke him in full. Thank you. If you have any questions on that.
Okay, thank you for that. You want to say something?
Yes, sir, Your Honor. I do represent Ms. Bess as well as the other victims. During a part of the plea negotiation in which this defendant received a suspended YOA probationary sentence was that each of the victims would have the opportunity to speak at his plea, as well as receive a restraining order against each of those three families. So, Your Honor, despite Mr. Turnblood's request, I believe that what occurred at the plea would inform this court as to all the victims should have an opportunity to be heard here today as they were at the guilty plea. To not allow them to speak here today would certainly not be what was part of the negotiation. Further, Your Honor, I certainly agree with Solicitor Weeks that Judge Dennis was absolutely clear that any violation would require this defendant to register as a sex offender. Your Honor, it is very clear there is a clear violation. He has admitted that he has violated, Your Honor. And I just would like the court to know that this defendant has failed every condition that the court and the state have exercised upon him, whether it was on bond, whether it was violating within days of him being pleading guilty. Your Honor, this defendant needs to be revoked and revoked in full, and he also needs to have the sex offender registry placed upon him as was required by Judge Dennis, which was clearly made to him and his attorney at the time, Senator Hutto. Your Honor, at this time, I do not believe any of the family members will wish to speak, but certainly are all in agreement that this defendant should be revoked and should be required to register.
All right. Anything else from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor, if I may, as I said, we have secured the funding. We were just asking for a full and fair chance to mitigate this. They weren't going to continue this hearing. So the only chance I have to mitigate anything with sex offender issues if I get this evaluation done. Furthermore, the person that probably knows the most about what they intended by this sentence is Judge Dennis, and he will be back here in Orangeburg later this year, I believe, the first week of December. So if
He's retired.
oh, we had him, I saw him on the docket, that's why I'll mention it.
He's no longer active.
Okay, I just saw his name on the docket, but they sent out ahead of time, 6 months.
They just decided to do this back. But he just told me about it.
Okay,
So
I got you. All right, I didn't know that, Your Honor.
Well, it's clear that he violated the terms of his probation by being arrested, taken out. From what I understand, on this charge, he went and got allowed to come into a bar, presumably using underage identification, and got intoxicated while he was there. The fact that he then left, he got thrown out basically, and then that was the basis for his arrest, of standing out there in the road drunk, throwing rocks, stuff like that. It was all basis for showing that he was supported. It would show that he likely offended. He didn't have to rise to the level of conviction, but it certainly rises to the level of supporting the revocation. And he admits that he was violating. So I'm going to revoke his probation, and he now has to do an active youthful offender act sentence. I understand your request for having a evaluation done. But the bottom line is that, you know, the conditions were clear that if you violated any of the terms of the standard sex offender conditions, then you would have to register as a sex offender. And that is, I will not consume alcoholic beverages. Really isn't a lot of negotiating there. He violated, he admits he violated the underlying basis for regular probation is supported by a charge of alcoholic consumption. And that is also a specific standard sex offender condition. So I really don't see where I have any leeway in that, no matter what the doctor says. So I am going to order that he also has to be registered as a sex offender. So that's the order of the court. You don't get any credit for time that you serve when you start an active time. So you sing up there, you start a year, you don't get credit for time served, but you can hold yourself since you got picked up. So good luck to you.
And Your Honor, may I just note my objection to going forward on the decision about sex offender
Sure.
today? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Judge, and maybe order a civil judgment for court fines for Mr. Turner.
Certainly.
Thank you. Brandon Johnson.